All right, everybody, welcome to the Locked On Avalanche podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Chris Maselli. With me, as always, Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan, and maybe a little bit different look if you're watching on YouTube. We stated yesterday we were having some issues, some technical issues with the service that we use, and we just couldn't get it right again. So we went to the old tried and true Zoom to record this bad boy. So no fancy graphics, but you don't need that to be a killer Avalanche podcast. That's all fancied up for all you people, and we don't need that around here.
That's right. We're going old school, baby.
Yeah, man, we're kicking it from 2018 style, man. So, but obviously, all that matters is the context of the show. So for today, Artturi Lehkonen is en route to Canada to meet up with his new teammates. It got pushed through. So we'll talk about that, what that all means. And then there's some good articles coming out on The Athletic, if you do subscribe to The Athletic, about the GM meetings going on right now. So some good things that they're talking there. Kyle and I will kind of throw our 2 cents into the mix, being the couch GMs that we are. But first things first, follow the show on social media outlets, LLPN_Avalanche on Twitter, Locked On Avalanche on Instagram, questions, comments, concerns, opinions to lockedonavalanche@gmail.com. And follow us on our YouTube channel over on YouTube. And obviously, because we're doing it this way, we're not live today. Once we get all that situated, we will be going back to the live versions because those are definitely fun.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Were you getting to the point of like the Lehkonen thing is just going to keep dragging out into who knows when? Because I was getting there. I was like, yeah. I just don't, there's nothing coming out about this as to why it's taking so long. And I got to the point where it's just like, nope, we're not going to have it. I'm preparing for life without Artturi Lehkonen already. And we haven't even had life with him, basically.
Yeah, I was honestly about to get on Bet Online and start and put in a bet where if it was Lehkonen, Girard, or Landeskog, who do you see first?
Oh, see that I know. And it was getting down that road, even though Landeskog's not till the end of the year. And maybe I'm being a little bit over dramatic, but it was just like, why is this taking so long? But it's over and his paperwork is signed. Like I said, he is en route, so he will be there for the Tuesday night matchup with Calgary. And they got him for reasons like this. Yeah. So what do we think? I know Jared Bednar has said he is going to be on the third line. Didn't say who else would be on that third line. Didn't say who would be on the fourth line. Didn't say who would be leaving the roster. But that's what we're here for, to kind of guess about all that stuff. So that's all the information we have, is that he's going to be on the third line. Who else makes up that third line?
Honestly, this is where it gets tricky, because if you've heard us mention it a couple times when it comes to the face-off percentages, JT Compher lives on that third line. He is also a left wing, but he's been like 75%, like 60-70% on the face-offs, which has been a sore spot. It's hard to move him on that third line.
Yeah, I know. But I feel like he's played some center at times. Like he could do it. Because he's listed as a left winger, so is Lehkonen. And then you have O'Connor is listed as a right wing. But I think I feel like Compher's been playing better.
Oh yeah,
I feel like everybody has been on those bottom six ever since these trades went down. So you have Lehkonen as one of those guys on the third line. Where do you put Nico Sturm? Is he your fourth line guy? He's been playing great since he came over. So
I was thinking really putting him down on that fourth line just to have that physical, that last little push before that top line comes out. Like, if he's going out there and he's diving around and trying to make plays on that fourth line and buying extra time and extra rest for that top line, yeah, Nico, he needs to he'll go down to that fourth line. And honestly, on that third line, if you could put Lehkonen with Newhook, I feel like that is your money combo right there.
Yeah, exactly. I think Lankinen, Newhook, and then who's the other guy? Probably Comfer. There's your,
Yeah.
center left wing. And I know Lankinen's listed as a left winger too. I don't think it's too difficult for those guys to, switch things around, especially JT Comfer, who I feel like
Yeah.
can kind of be a jack of all trades if he needs to be when it comes to left wing or right wing. And then on your fourth line, yeah, I think Sturm is your centerman. Like he's been great on faceoffs. Then you got Abe Kubel, you got Cagliano, and you have O'Connor. And I think O'Connor is in there. He's not. He's been kind of, taking a step back recently, but I think just the coaching staff likes him. They like his penalty kill, so I think he's safe. So then you're basically between Abe Kubel and Cagliano. So do you want to go with the guy that you just got, or do you want to go with the guy that you got a couple months ago?
This is where you put Cagliano out there because since he's joined the Avalanche, he has not seen more than 10 minutes of ice time. Like, this is where you test out exactly what we got here. Because out of every acquisition, with the exception of Lankinen so far, he's the question mark. Like, you know what you're getting at Sturm, you know what you're getting in Manson. Cagliano, you really haven't seen a lot. So put him out there, let him prove himself. And if that doesn't work, we'll go back with a starting to get a little hot Abe Kubel.
Yeah. I don't know. I find it funny that you have to put Cagliano out there to prove himself, and the guy's 34 years old. But he's with a new team, so he's got to prove himself with a new team. I get that. And this is kind of like what you've been saying recently, is like the Avs are in a position to screw around with some things and see what works. So if you don't put Abe Kubel out there right now, you tell him like, look, it's not fully because of how you've been playing. We have to see what we can put together, and we got to put the best lines together. And if that's Cagliano, then that's what it's going to be. And maybe that'll get him going a little bit more. But yeah, I mean, he came on when they brought him in off that waiver wire. Like that was that's just what a guy can do when he's gone from the Flyers for this year to a team like the Avs, and he was money.
Yeah,
it's kind of died down a little bit. Maybe you can catch lightning in a bottle with Cagliano. Hasn't really happened yet, but once he comes in and say like, all right, you are our fourth line guy. This is what we want you to do. Nothing more, nothing less. Once he knows what his role is with his new team, maybe you start seeing a little bit better production from him and a little bit of an uptick in numbers. Or I should say a little bit uptick in time, not numbers, but.
And what you're all doing this for, and another credit to where the Avs have put themselves in the standing positionally, like you can play around with it because you want to know exactly what role these players are going to fill if you need them or have to use them in the playoffs. Like if you get up there and let's say if the season ended today, we're playing Dallas and you need to get more physical and you know what you've seen out of Cagliano, okay, we could put him in, or you need to know what your scratches are going to be and what you're getting for these line combos in the playoffs. This is all practice for the playoffs. We're there. We're in. We know we're there. We need to figure out exactly what works with who for these situational moments when we get there. We lost, 7 players in the bubble during the playoffs and had to rely on Hutchinson and so many random goalies. It's good to have this knowledge going into the playoffs, not figuring it out on the fly when the lights are the brightest in the playoffs.
Yeah. And getting back to Lankinen, because that's what everybody's gonna be watching Tuesday night and what he can do. I think he just fits in so nicely with this Avalanche team. He's got good speed. What the Avalanche were looking for, and we've touched on this in episodes in the past, after their acquisitions, was zone exits. It's where they've struggled a lot this year, to have clean zone exits and even zone entries for that matter, especially on the power play. But they got, Sturm, who's a big body. So they covered your physical nature with Sturm and Manson. And then with Manson and Lankinen, you have a defender and now a forward who are really good at zone exits, collecting the puck in the defensive zone and getting it out of there. And if you have both of those two guys they're not going to be on the same line because one's a defender, one's a forward. But if they're going to be out there at the same time, that's double bonus because you have, Sturm, who's great at doing it, finding Lankinen, who's great at doing it. So I think this is really what the Avalanche are looking forward to when it comes to Lankinen and his zone exits and just his skill. He's a little bit on the thin side, but I think his skill kind of overtakes maybe his lack of muscle. And I think people are going to be really impressed with him that don't really watch a lot of Canadian games. I think you're going to love having this guy around for, what the playoffs, what they're going to need from all of their players in the playoffs. I think without a doubt.
When you hear Bednar talk about Lankinen, like you heard McNabb talking about seeing him in practice the other day and being a straight up hockey player. He's 5'9", 179 pounds. Like not that huge, but I've heard Bednar compare his style to a very a Val Nichushkin light. Like he said, it's another Val Nichushkin, and they want some more of that bowling ball physicality when it comes to play, and not like every time you hear him talk about the Jost trade, they always reference the Vegas series and how they weren't physical enough, where Jost would take himself out of the play when he doubted himself. Like Lankinen will insert himself in the play, and that's what they're wanting is more. And with the zone exits, that's how you start it. And getting that with Lankinen, I think is going to be a really, really huge addition for the Avalanche.
Yeah, be interesting to see how much time they give him because he hasn't been playing for a little while with all of this nonsense going on. They just ease him in, but you're going up against Calgary, so you don't have time really to ease him in. He's got to jump in there feet first, and let's see what you can do, man. Get the puck and go. So I'm really looking forward to him settling in nicely with this team.
Yeah.
All right, let's hear from who do we got first here today? Bet Online. And then GM meetings. Those are always fun to discuss. But after months of playing, college basketball has determined the top seeds for their Final Four and will determine this year's national champions when this coming week. I have I have Duke I had in, and I can't remember if that's all I had. I remember my Final Four. I had Houston. I had obviously Purdue winning it, and they're out. And who's the other one? So you got North Carolina, you got Duke, you got Kansas. I had Kansas, so I had 2 out of 4. I had 2 out of 4.
Not bad.
All right. But betonline.net is your number one source for all of your betting needs and sports info from all the latest odds, contests, and player props. You name it, betonline.net has got it. It remains the best spot for all of your latest sports developments, including podcasts and reviews for all the leagues this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sporting wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and the action. That is betonline.net, where the game starts. All right. If you subscribe to The Athletic, or you can go other places too that are reporting on this. We're just reading from The Athletic because I just like their reporting. Pierre LeBrun he did both of these. So there's 2 articles that he has up there now of what's going on in the GM meetings. And I love what goes on the ice for hockey. Don't get me wrong. It's obviously the best sport in the world, but I get just as much enjoyment out of what goes on off the ice, like the trade deadline, like the draft and stuff like this, like NHL GM meetings. So they get together and they hash things out. They talk about, concerns that they have within the league, collective bargaining agreements that are coming up pretty soon, which we will get into in the off season. But some of the things that they talk about here are things that we'll bring up. And one of the big ones is the salary cap and extending it into the playoffs. And, for anybody that maybe hockey fans that have been living under a rock, there is no salary cap in the playoffs. And there's various reasons why there's not. But the interesting thing is, and he gets into this in the article, is there's no concrete reason as to why. Just when they implemented the salary cap, they just didn't include it. And the reasons that they give, some make sense. I mean, I guess they all make sense, but there's no one clear-cut reason why. So we don't have a salary cap. But with the way things have gone recently and people circumventing it using the LTIR, which is, within rights, but it just kind of rubs some people the wrong way. So they're discussing carrying the salary cap into the playoffs. Good idea?
I think it's a fantastic idea. Honestly, it's one of those that if you're going to gamble and set your team up like Vegas or Tampa Bay, if things go wrong, you have to deal with it. Like your Colorado Avalanche, like your mid-tier, mid-talent team, like we don't have the resources a lot of these other teams have when it comes to facilities and finances and that swagger. So it's, if something doesn't go right, you don't get to circumnavigate with the LTIR and then, oh, everyone's magically healthy for the playoff run. Here we go.
Yeah.
Like, you make it an even playing field for everyone. And this will help out teams, including like the lower tier teams, like your Ottawa, your Detroits, your San Jose's. Like, this makes it even for everybody.
So here's my issue with it is, things, you have to address things like this when they become a problem. And it wasn't a problem for a solid 10 years. They implemented the cap in 2005, and it wasn't until 2015 when Chicago utilized it with Patrick Kane and went on to win a championship. And now you had Tampa do it, and now you have Vegas actively doing it. So for the first 10 years was never a problem. So there's no reason to address it. Within the last 7, you've had at least 3. And did Tampa do it twice? I don't know if Tampa, I think Tampa just did it that one time. But you've had at least 3 teams do it in the later stage, like in more recent years. Okay, now it needs to be addressed. If it was just an outlier that Chicago was doing it that one year and they utilized it, they found the loophole. But when you win the championship in doing it, other teams are going to be like, okay, yep, we weren't going to do it before, but they did it and won a championship. And guess what? Their names are engraved. So we're going to start doing it. And now you're going to see more and more teams doing it. So it needs to get addressed. I really like what LeBron says in here. Gord Miller actually posted it. And he has kind of like a soft cap, or I don't know how he calls it, during the regular. So he says during the regular season, a team's NHL roster of 23 players max must be under the cap. That wouldn't work in the playoffs with expanded rosters. And he says, my proposal, the game roster, which is 20 guys, has to be under the cap. So that would work. So you can have your 23 guys. So it's basically every day you're putting together numbers. It's a numbers game. And okay, what are the guys we have? This is our expanded roster for the playoffs. Which 20 guys are we plucking out of that expanded roster to get under the cap?
Yeah.
That I like. We can do something like that.
If you dress them, cap them. It's basically that simple. And honestly, I really like that idea. And you can still get the best of both worlds. You can play with the LTIR a little bit, carry them all the way, and then figure out what you can afford to put on the ice. It's a reward for getting there, to getting to the playoffs, that you get this luxury of picking and choosing your roster, but like it also limits it from really abusing the LTIR.
Yeah. Right, because it does need to get addressed. It does. It's I don't want to say it's getting out of hand, but teams aren't going to think twice about if they should utilize LTIR. That's in a good position to do so. So, and they're not breaking any rules by doing it. So we'll see where that goes. Another one was no trade lists. And this obviously is coming up because of Vegas and their debacle. And so the kind of something similar to how I was just talking about the LTIR and salary cap circumvention wasn't a problem for the first 10 years. This really isn't a problem either. You know what I mean? Like it happened. I love that it happened to Vegas. But this is not something that happens every single trade deadline. So do we need to go revamping everything because it happened? I think the NHL is of the mind of, this is embarrassing. Yes, we're going to address it. where I think a lot of people are like, well, because it did happen, teams are now going to be they're going to, check all of those boxes off to make sure it doesn't happen to them. But I don't think the NHL wants to take that risk, and they're going to implement some stuff. And we'll get into one of the main things in a second, but I want to get your take on if it should happen or not.
I honestly might be on the other side of this coin. I might be one of those, like, it was caught. There's not so much of a competitive advantage when it comes to this little snafu, if you will, but like, this is basically just a clerical error and executives not doing their job on really examining the contracts and these no trade agreements. They're not really a list, it's an agreement.
I just don't get how, I'm sorry, knowing that no trade clauses are all over the place. Why would you not just, that would just be in my checklist of things to do if I'm trading a player. Does he have a no trade list? And it just seems that Vegas didn't even ask that question. So, and you're not getting into the logistics of, who's at fault here. I think a lot of people are at fault here, but Vegas obviously is for not asking that question. That's a basic question. If you're going to trade a guy, you make sure you can trade him to that team. Seems pretty simple.
And when you go farther into this article, when you see how these no trade lists are actually set up, there's really nothing in play to where you could say, I have a 10-team no trade list. And then you say, okay, well, that's fine. We're going to trade you to Columbus. And you're like, oh, yeah, that's one of my 10. Who really could, like, who can?
Well, are you saying like they could pull a fast one on them?
Yeah. Like, oh, that's part of my 10.
They can't do that. No. They can't. That list has to be in. There is it's got to be with the team that he's currently with. That's the problem, is especially with Dadonov. Like, Ottawa had that list, and when he got traded, Ottawa's supposed to turn that list over. Vegas is saying they never did that. So a list is supposed to be in and filed, and they can't just pull the rug out and say, like, no, I don't want to go there. Because then you essentially just have a no trade clause for whatever you want to do.
Well, if these are turned in between, it's an agreement between player and agent. But again, I kind of say that tongue in cheek, like that scenario, but we're talking about a scenario that we have taken for granted. Like, this should not happen.
Right.
Like, no trade clauses, like, you should understand what teams are on that list and where they can and cannot go. But here we are with a reverse trade. Never seen that in my life. And here we are having the conversation. Like, should this be, I think the whole system, like, bringing it back to you, if it does get addressed, it does need to go to a database or something. But it's very loosey goosey, and we've been riding really good on this road trip on donuts, and I think that's kind of how it is right now.
Well, and that's what the proposal is give it to Central Registry, and they have it. And then if a player is going to be traded, it's so easy to bring that up. Okay, and Pierre LeBrun says something about he had one team executive who and LeBrun wants this to happen, and personally he wants that to happen. And he got a text from an exec. He read his column and he disagreed with him. And he said, okay, here you go. He didn't feel like the wheel needed to be reinvented. I guess that's a great way to put it. Is kind of how I was trying to describe it, is you don't need to reinvent the wheel because one stupid thing happened. But again, the league is probably very embarrassed by it, so they're going to act on it. They should call the agent and ask if they can provide a timestamped email in the list submitted. They will either get the document or be informed that it was not sent. And there's one other, I get what this team exec is saying, and that the information in those lists is sensitive. And that is true. You have these guys, if it gets out who's on their list, that's not good. That's personal kind of info that really shouldn't be out there. You know what I mean? So, and how protected is it if it goes into Central Registry? You would hope pretty much protected. But one other thing we're going to get to here is leaks. And does that, would you hear the term Central Registry, and that seems like,
It's like a Tron reference,
like a vault. You know what I mean? Like it's not going to get out, but crazier things have happened. So that's the risk that you run. I don't know. I agree. I like the phrasing of reinventing the wheel. I don't think it needs to be done. It was a stupid error. And because it happened, every team is going to be due diligence on making sure they know exactly if there is a no trade clause and where the teams you can and cannot go to. So.
Yeah, I'm all about the information being in the right hands, because you don't want no trade lists also becoming bargaining chips. Mm-hmm. Like, hey, I know where Pavelski wants to go.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
You don't want that to happen. Like, hey, why don't you tell me a little bit about your player as me, the agent, and I'll tell you 2 of the teams that my guy's not going to go to.
Right. Yeah. So another interesting thing. So a couple more to get to. First, we're going to hear from Rock Auto. With the ever increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that you need. So why endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand that their warehouse happens to carry, when you have a computer with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when choosing Rock Auto. It's a family-run business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, and the prices are reliably low for every customer. So go explore their easy-to-use website and find the solution to your auto parts needs. You can go to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your cart or truck, right locked on in the How Did You Hear About Us section, so they know that we sent you to them. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need at rockauto.com. All right, what else we got here? Officiating was a big topic, and I don't know what to make of this, man, because the phrasing that they use is they want consistency. And I got to ask the question, like, why in 2022 are we still complaining about inconsistency in officiating? It's kind of like, even when they went back to really calling cross checks, it's like, why did we even need to go there to begin with? It's in the rule book, call it. And that is the only thing that I care about, is like, call the rule book.
Yeah,
it's that simple. I don't like these unwritten rules and the, of you don't call this. And I said it in yesterday's episode about Eric Johnson and the dumb penalty he committed at the end. And some people were like, you don't call that at that stage in the game. I don't play by that.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter to me if it's, the first minute of the game or the 59th, you call it.
Yeah.
That's just me, because you're going to go both. Once you start having those gray areas, there's no end to those gray areas. And how far much do you back up because it happened in the last minute? And then when it happens in the second to last minute, then you're going to be complaining about that. Call the rule book. It's easy to do, but there were execs in this article saying we just don't know what a penalty is. It's kind of like the NFL saying for a long time, we don't know what pass interference is. That's not good. This is the rules we're talking about here. It should be simple, clear as day, and it's not right now.
And honestly, I side with the GMs here. You want consistency, especially coming out of that game against Minnesota. You would see so many, what you would say, like, that was a slash. Why didn't they call it? But why did they call this? Like, just call it both sides. Like, if that was a slash, call the slash. Like, there's linesmen, there's referees, there are enough eyeballs on this where they could get it right. They have Toronto watching the games, enact them. If it's a 50-50, enact it. Like, I don't know what you have to do to be more consistent in this regard. But when it comes to the game, like you mentioned, this game's been around for 100+ years. We've taken out the 2-line pass, but everything else is pretty much the same.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like frustrating on one end, because you should go into watching a hockey game and knowing what's going to be called. And excuse me. I don't know. Like I said, it's just frustrating. Calls are going to get missed. That's I think that's some people say it's the beauty in sports is the human error part of it. I'm okay with that. That gives you and I something to, complain about on a podcast like that.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, a call's going to get missed. But when you know that you can see the positioning of the refs and, they just blatantly don't call something, maybe why don't we have refs have press conferences?
That would solve so many problems.
What did you see? And kind of really have a sit down with them and be like, be honest. I know it's easier said than done, because they're always going to kind of, say, well, it wasn't, I didn't see it or something. But, if you can kind of like press them to not do that and just be like, look, like you might get dragged through the mud for missing this call, but if you can just own up to it, maybe people would be more willing to, like I would be.
Yeah.
If a ref would do a press conference and say, yeah, I missed that one. Okay. Thank you. Don't give me the BS, answer of there was no penalty there. And maybe that's what needs to happen. Maybe we just need to hear from the refs as to why they're calling it the way that they are or are not.
And I could see both sides of why you wouldn't, but honestly, what you need to do is have these referees finish the game, come out 5 questions. That's all you get.
There you go.
5 questions. Answer 5 questions about your calls that you made the night. And guess what? We get our answers, and the referees go and say, you know what? They were really grilling me about why I called that hooking. And then he's going to think about next time he suits up and hits the ice.
Mm-hmm.
That I'm going to have to really pay attention to my hooking. Guess what? Everybody gets better.
Yeah.
The referees get better. Our information is better, and we get to sleep with a little bit more peace at night.
Yeah, they don't have to answer to anything right now. And that's just not right. We all in our jobs have to answer to somebody. And well, they answer to somebody, but we don't hear about that at all.
At the end of the year.
Yeah. And I think in the sports world, it's just an information driven entity with sports. Like we should have that information when it comes to officials. We have information on everything else. Why don't we have information on that? I don't know. And then especially with Department of Player Safety, we really need a revamp there. Like that's just getting ridiculous. Like we need a chart of this. If you do this, you get this. And it's cut and dry. And it's so funny when you see people on social media say, "Let's spin the wheel." And that's the best analogy that you can come up with, that because you literally have no idea. And that's not right. We should not have to be playing guessing games on a suspension or a fine or nothing. It's you did this, you get this. Here's a little chart. And even, Tommy Boy Callahan would be able to understand it, with Herbie Hancock.
And like what it's like a kindergarten principle that would solve so many things. Like the penalties are very inconsistent, the repercussions are inconsistent, the appeals process is inconsistent, your history is inconsistent. If you just say, if you did this, you get this, if you did this within this amount of time, you get this plus this.
Right. Yeah. The way you just described it is much more convoluted than what could be on a piece of paper. And you didn't even describe it that poorly. I understood what you were saying, but just imagine it's an Excel spreadsheet. It literally can be an Excel spreadsheet. And if you want to throw in has a player been, suspended in the past, you could even throw that in there if you really wanted to use that. And I think we put a little bit too much emphasis on that because,
it puts almost, for lack of a better term limits on like a pass, like a repeat offender status. Like it puts some kind of limit on it.
Yeah.
Like where we're like with Nas, it hits close to the Avalanche. Like it affects some, but not other players. But there's a huge gap of clean, but he did it before. Like if you make that tighter, it helps so many things.
Yeah, agreed. So we'll see if anything else comes out of these, but they're all good topics and things that need to get addressed. So that will wrap it up for today. Let us know what you guys think of all this stuff. I know you guys got opinions, and we'll be talking to the people in the YouTube stream, I'm sure. Very opinionated over there. I love it.
They are.
Yeah.
My people.
Right. So for now, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day. Go check out Locked On NHL and make that your second listen of the day. Get caught up in everything going on around the league. And Kyle and I will be back tomorrow to discuss some Avalanche Flames action. So until then, he is Mr. Shaggy Von Doom, Kyle Sullivan. I am Chris Maselli, and this is the Locked On Avalanche podcast. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We'll see if we can get the audio stuff figured out ASAP. We'll see you guys tomorrow.